Welcome back to another episode of Reflect Live, the podcast where stories come to life and hearts are opened. I'm your host, Michelle. Here in Reflect Live, we offer a platform for people from all walks of life to share their experiences, their triumphs, and their challenges. It's a space where people thrive and connections are made through the power of storytelling. And today we have something truly special in store for you. So grab your favorite beverage, find a cozy spot, and let's dive into another episode of Reflect Live. Get ready to be inspired, moved, and maybe even crack a smile or two. This is Reflect Live with Michelle.
You've reached Reflect Live podcast, and I'm Michelle. I'm your host, and I have Michelle Cramer. So you have the double Michelles here.
Yeah.
How are you doing, Michelle?
Good. And the irony is that my second in command for my organization is also named Michelle. Everybody's always like, oh, two Michelles? That's easy.
That's awesome.
She's been with me from the beginning too. So it's funny.
Well, let's talk about the beginning.
Yeah.
The beginning of what? So tell us all about it.
I'm the founder and executive director of On Angels Wings. We are a nonprofit organization based out of Springfield, Missouri, but we serve all of Missouri and beyond. We work with families that have medically fragile children or who lose a child at birth, offering them ongoing support that starts with a free photo shoot. And then we continue to provide those for kids that are thriving despite their diagnosis, or we just provide like grief recovery and things like that for those families. So it's something we've been doing. We're celebrating 11 years this year. And so the beginning, so it really kind of I started doing photography in 2007. My personal photography business is Eternal Image Photography. That's still active. So I've been doing that for, I have to add, that would be 17 years. Yeah, I think that's right. And then about 2008, my first son was born. And I was super naive. I was 27. Nobody talked about all the things that could possibly go wrong. So I was convinced that once I got past 12 weeks and didn't have a miscarriage, that everything was going to be fine. When he was about a month old, I was watching the Today Show, and there was a national broadcast about an organization that did bereavement photography for birth loss. And I knew my grandmother had birth losses, but I didn't know how common it still was. And because I had just gotten into photography, like I wanted so desperately to do something for my community with that. And that was immediately, I was just holding my newborn child and sobbing because he was perfect and everything was fine, but these families didn't get to have that. So I started getting involved with that organization. I did that for about 18 months and just really saw some limitations. Namely, they didn't have any support system for the families after we did pictures for them. And that was really hard for me. I consider myself an empath. It was really hard to not support them, to not make sure that they were okay. And then I wanted to do more than just birth loss. I recognized that there were so many families in our community that have ongoing medical bills, and they're traveling for, specialists, and they're dealing with all of these medical supplies they have to have at home. And, they're on a one family income because they have a child that needs 24/7 care. They don't have the money to afford free photos and the kind of support that we wanted to offer. So I wanted to expand that. Fast forward till after I had my second child, we finished expanding our family, and I knew time was allowing for more possibilities there. A friend of mine knew what I wanted to do and introduced me to a family whose 7-month-old had spinal muscular atrophy. So basically, it's a genetic condition that causes the muscles to deteriorate from birth, and most don't see their second birthday. So I went to their home and did pictures. Mom had a bucket list of things that they wanted to do before he passed. And that day we did touching and playing in dirt and mud for the first time. So she's got him in her lap, and he's got Tupperware, she's putting his hands in Tupperware so he can touch and feel dirt and mud. And, he liked it, and then eventually got a little overstimulated, and he couldn't even hold up his own head at 7 months old, but you just watched him. He mustered every ounce of energy, and he pushed that Tupperware off her lap, and it went everywhere. And I got this beautiful picture of him just laughing in glee at himself. And it was just this different moment where I had, up to that point, doing bereavement work, had just connected, with the families in their most tragic circumstances, right? And this gave me an opportunity to not only capture some joyful moments for the family when their time was fleeting with their child, but also to connect with the child. He passed about 3 months later. I got to do like a goodbye session for them a few days before he passed. And then I went to his funeral and just came home sobbing to my husband, like, I'm ready. I want to do this. I'm ready. And he's like, let's go. And so that was in 2013. In the summer of 2013, I started this organization, and it was intending to serve Springfield. And then we pretty much immediately added St. Louis because people were going there for specialists. Wow. And we did it started in the middle of 2013. So we didn't really build momentum until 2014. We did 43 photo shoots in 2014. We did 453 photo shoots in 2023.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And that's compared to 267 in 22. So we have seen exponential growth. Like I said, we serve all of Missouri. Last year, we opened our first out-of-state chapters in Oklahoma City and Minneapolis. But even that was only 14 of the sessions last year. So we anticipate that growing even more because we'll be more established in those locations. We've got 2 locations we're working on launching that are out of state this year as well. So it's just, I quit my full-time job. I was a managing editor for a publishing company and in the journalism field, and I quit the mid 2022 to do this full time. So last year was my first year full time doing only this. And it's been explosive.
It sounds like a blessing. Now, is it a free session or it is? Okay.
Everything that we offer to the recipients is free. And that includes, we have events in our bigger service areas. In Springfield, every year we've had a carnival called Making Memories Day. It's held at the Shrine Mosque in June, and our recipients get to attend that for free. They even get access like an hour early before the community does. And then we started a gala last year the same day. So we transitioned the space, and we always do like 2 tables for recipients for free. We do we're going to a Springfield Cardinals game in April. St. Louis Cardinals, we partner with them and they gave us tickets. So our recipients in St. Louis are going to a St. Louis Cardinals game. Yeah. So we just do a lot of things to try and build community for them and that ongoing support, connecting them with one another, but also letting them know that they're not alone and that we're here for them as well. Our lost families get memorial gifts from us. So about the 3 to 6 month mark, we send them a necklace and a keychain to memorialize the child they lost, mostly because we've heard that around that time is when people stop acknowledging that child for them, and they feel like they're just so alone in the life that they want to celebrate, but nobody really knows how to anymore. And then we do a paper flower, these gorgeous paper flowers that someone makes for us for the first 3 years on the anniversary month of their loss to continue to tell them we still are thinking about you. And we do it longer if we could. We just have so many recipients now that it just 3 years is about all we can do.
My mother recently lost my grandma. When you were saying that people quit acknowledging, after 36 months, it was like they had the mentality of, okay, you've mourned, get over it.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of where, like, you touched me when you said that, because I know what my mom's going through, and she feels like she can't talk about it anymore because nobody wants to hear about it. Nobody, you should be over it by now.
Yeah.
Does your mom's go through that?
Absolutely. In fact, I actually wrote a book in 2022 called Unshattered Grief, helping others through loss without breaking them again. I feel like there's a lot of information out there about how to grieve, but there's very little information about how to help someone that's grieving, because we don't really do a good job of that as a society. And it really was, after 16 years of doing this, it really was obvious to me, all the stories that I was hearing, families coming to me and telling me about, what people would say to them. And you've got, the platitudes like, I'm sorry for your loss, or, God has a plan, which I am a person of faith. But the last thing that even a person of faith wants to hear when they're holding their deceased baby in their arms is that God has a plan. That could break their faith just to say that. So there's things like that. There's, this, well, let me know if you need anything. Well, that puts the action on the griever who can't even remember if they took a shower. So, I am passionate about changing the way that we handle grievers, and just really, we need to be saying, I don't know what to say because I can't understand what you're going through. how can I help? I'm available. What do you need? And
Do
even
you
if
have
they
a
don't,
memorable
go ahead.
story, like a mom that really touched your heart, or a family that really
So
touched?
many. Oh my gosh. I have a family that I still do pictures for the organization too. So I kind of fill the gaps here in Springfield. And then I have, when we have our, what we call our journey kids are the ones that are still thriving. When we have those kiddos doing pictures at least once a year, we kind of keep them with the same photographer. So I have kids that I started working with years ago that I'm still working with.
Hold
And
on, Michelle. Let me back up. When you said the journey, did you say journey kids?
Yes, journey kids.
So were they sick at birth and then they lived? Tell
Yeah,
a little bit about
most of them, those are our kids that are still thriving. So what we call medically fragile. So they're born with a genetic disorder, an anomaly, a heart condition, trisomy, something like that. And so basically their family lives every day wondering if tomorrow's going to be the last day.
Wow.
And so we just at least do one session a year for them. And then of course, continue to invite them to all of our events and things like that so that the family gets the opportunity to build those memories. So I still do all of these sessions, and occasionally I go to the hospital to do a loss session. And a couple of years ago, I went in to do a session, and it was a couple who this was the third son they had lost. They had 3 girls at home, but every little boy that they had, they lost. And they knew a little bit ahead of time and did, they go in. Usually when that happens and like heart tones are gone, they have to wait a couple of days to go into the hospital to deliver. And so they got all of these things together. They brought in a CD player and were playing worship music and things. So I, knew that they were people of faith, but we make it policy not to share our beliefs during those moments because again, one sentence could break someone.
Sure.
So we're just taking pictures and doing what we can. And this song comes on that just really embodies the moment, basically about like praising God in the midst of your battles and hardship. And I kid you not, all 3 of us, I get goosebumps even now talking about it. All 3 of us started crying. And that mom now, like she talks to our photographers when they volunteer to explain to them how important it is that we emotionally connect with the family in those moments, the kind of impact that made on her. And just that, she put a post up on Facebook somehow. I didn't even know it. Somebody snuck a picture of me taking pictures of them and said, this is not just an image of someone taking pictures. This is an image of someone meeting us in our, I get emotional, meeting us in our darkest place.
Sure.
And being present with us and honoring that space. And God love it. About a year later, I got to do pictures of the little boy they finally got to bring home. It's just powerful. Yeah, it's powerful stuff, man. There's so many stories like that.
Wow.
Some of them don't always have a happy ending either.
Yeah.
So that's why, I myself, my director of support, one of my board members and a volunteer so far, because we want to get more, are all certified in the grief recovery method. So we have a dedicated program that we offer to our recipients for free. In fact, we decided that it was a great way to invest in our community. So it is anytime we have one, it's open to the community when we have one of our programs available.
Let's talk about the grief recovery.
Sure. 100% of people grieve. And a lot of times when we hear the word grieving, we associate it with death. But there are so many ways. In fact, the institute that we're certified through has found more than 40 ways through their research that people will have grief. And you can have grief from something as small as moving because you're leaving behind something. There's grief associated with getting married because you're losing some independence. Even though it's a happy day, there's grief associated with it. There is, of course, the loss of a loved one, but there's divorce, estrangement from a parent or sibling or friend. They even have the institute it's the Grief Recovery Institute. They even have a book on pet loss because society doesn't address that appropriately either. And so there's just all of these ways that we could be grieving. And the program that we do, it's a 7-week program. You meet once a week, you go through a book and you have homework and you work on basically examining your loss history and then identifying the biggest losses in your life and focusing in on like the relationships associated with those losses. And eventually you come to a place where you're writing a letter that nobody's going to see. Whether it's to somebody that's passed or somebody alive, they're never going to see it. And you're writing a letter that has these apologies, forgivenesses, significant emotional statements for you, bringing out all of the emotion that we tend to push down, and you read it to someone, whether it is a one-on-one where they're reading it to me, or sometimes we do groups where we do small groups. Like we'll do a group of 15, but we'll break out into groups of 3. So you have that very intimate setting where you're sharing with those people. And it's the idea of giving all of these emotions that you push down a voice and acknowledging them. And it is super empowering. I went through the program before I got certified in the program. I love to tell the story about my co-leader, Michelle. We got certified together in 2020. The relationship, she lost a child 28 years ago. She was 5 months old. But the first relationship she worked on was a relationship with her husband, which, you know, they had a happy marriage, but she had, they had never talked about their loss together. And she had so much resentment built up. As much as she loved him, she wanted to release that resentment. So she did. She worked on the relationship with her husband. I saw a tangible release in her. They got their marriage changed for the better. It got better than it had ever been in 30 years.
Wow.
And then he died of COVID 2 years after that.
Oh my gosh.
And to hear her tell the story of how, first of all, processing his loss, because she had that special time with him that it felt like everything there was no regrets when he passed away, you know? So she was able to process his death without having all of these things that she never dealt with attached to his death. And it's super, super powerful stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Wow. Now the training, is it in person or is it online? Can you do both?
It was in person until COVID. So it's an online training. It's a 3-day training process. And, you know, it costs a couple $1,000s, but we found it to be very, very valuable. Yeah. Yeah. It's the only evidence-based grief recovery program in the world. They're in 20 countries. I've been around for 20 years. It's good stuff. Just nobody's ever heard of it.
Yeah, no, it sounds great. Like if anybody's listening and wants to learn about this, they can just Google grief.
Yeah, it's griefrecoverymethod.com. It's pretty easy.
Okay. Yeah, there you go. Nice.
Yeah.
I'm actually writing it down for myself. So how do you handle this?
I hear that a lot. Oh, I couldn't do what you do. I'm so emotional. But like I said earlier, I'm an empath, which means I can feel the tangible changes in a room that come with somebody's mood. I firmly believe, actually done a lot of research because I'm trying to understand what this really is, you know, because it sounds a little hippy dippy to say I'm an empath and I feel people's emotions, but you know,
explain to people if they don't know what that means.
Yeah. So we all produce brain waves. We have a heartbeat that, you know, has a tangible rhythm, and just the general population is not in tune to those things. But there's something about me, and actually my oldest son too, where when somebody has an emotional response, we literally can feel the change in the space around them. And then we have an emotional response with that. So then one would think that doing this work and having that emotional response, that I wouldn't be able to do it, that it would be too hard. But in fact, it gives me this space to connect to families when I can never understand what they're going through. I've never had a miscarriage. I've never had a sick child. So I never claim to understand what they're going through, but I can connect to them in a way that some people can't. Sure. And acknowledge what they're going through in a way that some people can't. And there really is, you know, I have to take time to care for myself. I definitely have given from an empty cup for some time in this space. And I've learned the hard way that if I don't want to get burnt out and have to walk away from what I consider to be my third child, then I have to take some space to care for myself as well.
Sure.
So I've gotten much better at that with the help of my own therapist and things, which I, you know, think everybody needs at some point in their life. It's not, I think what it really comes down to is any discomfort that I feel in doing this work is absolutely nothing compared to what these families feel. And if I can allow myself that sacrifice so that they feel supported, then it's 100% worth it.
Wow. Yeah, because I'm just visualizing, you know, when an infant passes and when you're taking a picture, you have to mold them and, you know, shape them and put them in different poses and stuff. And I'm just
we definitely work to try and make it look like they're sleeping rather than the fact that they're gone. But the
Wow.
nurses at the hospital are great to help us with that, especially, I mean, I've been doing it for 16 years, so I just kind of get in there and do the thing, but I don't ever expect that of our volunteer photographers. And so, and they're all volunteers. We have over 100 volunteer photographers with the organization. So I don't expect that with them. So we always ask the nurse to stay with them and help them with that process.
Any of your volunteers think, Michelle, I thought I could handle this, but I'm out. I can't do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had the other way too, where, we don't, when they volunteer for us, we don't require them to go in to do the hospital sessions. They can just work with the families who are outpatient and the kiddos medically fragile if they want to. And then after a little while, some of them say, you know what, I want to give the hospital stuff a try. So we've had a few do that for us too. So it's just, each individual is different and we honor their capacity. Absolutely. And we protect our recipients and we protect our photographers. So even though I may have a photographer that's maybe gone on a couple sessions in the last month and is like, I'll take this one too. I will set those boundaries. And no, I don't want you getting burnt out. We need to set these emotional boundaries for you as well. And so we always talk to them after a session, make sure they're doing okay and walk them through it if we need to. Okay. So this is Ellie. Ellie's been coming to us since she was 1. She has a Q22 deletion. So it is a chromosomal deletion. Golly, I'm going to get emotional. Because she's been coming to us since she was 1 and she's now almost 10, I think. Her mama's going to correct me, I'm sure. I've gotten really, really close to them. And this is one of the families that I do pictures for. About 5 years ago, Ellie had a heart and double lung transplant.
Oh my goodness.
And literally the night before she was on the transplant list, doctors told her parents the night before, we don't think she's going to make it more than another day if something doesn't happen. We did a goodbye session in the hospital up in St. Louis. Late that night, they got the call that they had a heart and lungs.
Oh my gosh.
And so this precious girl, she's nonverbal, but her parents understand her completely. They have a whole separate language with her. That's all groans and mutters, and they just know exactly what she's saying. And she's just so, so precious to me. And just to be able to follow this journey with her and watch her grow up. I remember really distinctly after her heart and lung transplant, she had to stay home in like a bubble for well over a year. And she wasn't physically capable of doing a whole lot. And I remember we'd always done like in-home pictures or in the studio or something because she couldn't be around anybody else. And about a year after, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, I don't even know. We did a photo shoot at the park with all her little friends like her cousins and her friends came to play with her at the park. And we'd never done that. And I have this beautiful picture of her jumping in the air. Ellie couldn't jump before. She couldn't do anything physical like that. And it was just like, like so exciting to watch her jump, just jump up and down. Ellie, jump for me. And she would just go crazy. And we did pictures at her grandmother's pool with her swimming. And she was just having a blast and just big old cackles on her face. I mean, it's just, this is what happens. We get so attached to these kiddos. And we watch them, go through so much and their parents go through so much. And we just don't want them to ever feel like they're alone. And they just I always tell our recipients that you're stuck with us. You're part of our family now.
That's so cool. That is so cool.
Directly. And they know what we do. So we make sure that it's like somebody that's skilled in trauma and grief. And in fact, one of our board members, the one that is also certified, is also a licensed counselor. So he, really works with our families to make sure that it's something that they can afford if they really need it. And his name is Micah Clark. He is a godsend. He and his wife are recipients as well. In fact, they lost their son several years ago at stillbirth, full term. And Micah's experience with everyone asking him all the time, how's your wife? And not asking him how he was.
Sure.
Opened his eyes to, again, one of those things about how people handle grief and how men are just supposed to be strong. So nobody asks. And that led him to start working on becoming a licensed counselor so that he
Mm.
could be a safe space
Mhm.
for those that are grieving, but especially those dads.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty
Yeah.
awesome.
And just think, you had an idea. God just like, here, I'm going to put this in your lap, and and look
Yeah.
what's evolved from it.
I remember that first organization that I was involved in. Unfortunately, it wasn't the best of circumstances when I left, but I literally was sobbing because I was like, I can't do this. Now I don't get to do this. And my friend looked at me and said, who said this is the end? A fire has been lit inside of you, and there's more for you to do.
That's good.
And I felt like God just kept telling me, yes, but not now. Yes, but not now. And then after Logan and meeting him, when I left his funeral, I was literally sobbing, begging God, please now. And I felt like he said, it's time. And then it's just been explosive and crazy. And I say explosive, but that's probably not the correct term because we're very intentional in how we expand. We do it very slowly. And we're very meticulous about it because we want the integrity of the organization to always be maintained because that support is so vital. And if we don't have that integrity, then support is not there and we can fail a family. And I don't want that to happen. So people ask us, how did you end up in Oklahoma City and Minneapolis of all places? Well, because I had a photographer friend in Oklahoma City that said, I want to do this here. And her heart and passion was in the right place. And she's been a godsend in that location. And we work with both Integris Baptist and OU Hospital in Oklahoma City now. And then in Minneapolis, I had friends from college that moved up there. And she is a NICU nurse that travels from hospital to hospital in that area and recognized we really need something like this. And of course, Minneapolis, that community is so scarred and hurting and grieving that, our eventual goal is to have our, grief recovery specialists there in that community so that we can serve that community as well, not just the families that qualify for our services. So we've got, but we were taking it very slowly to make sure that we're serving the families well. We start with building our photographer base first. When somebody comes to us and says, I think we need this in our location. And then I say, here's what we need in place. And that first thing is photographers, because I don't want to go to the hospital and say, hey, we have this service and we don't have anybody to do it. So they start calling us and we're telling them no. It doesn't establish that trust with the hospital. So we do that. Then we go to one hospital in the community. Once we feel like that hospital is served well and we're maintaining those processes well, then we'll ask another hospital if they want our services. So again, it's very, very slow process.
Wow.
So I never went into this going, oh, I'm going to make this national. Like I have no intention. I had no intention of that. And God had bigger plans.
Right.
So it just kind of happened.
You want to start this because I got some plans for you.
Yeah. He did not fill me in the beginning, or I may not have done it.
Yeah, that's so funny. Well, and I always say that God has jokes because you created me, and I feel like he has to have a sense of humor, right? So he's looking down, just kind of giggling right now, and be like, I got you.
And I think while we're kind of talking about grief a little bit too, I think it's important for anybody that may be watching this and grieving and maybe feeling guilty that you're mad at God. I grew up in a church environment where any negative emotions, any mental health struggles were met with your faith's not strong enough. And I don't believe that anymore. I believe that God gave us our emotions so that we could process the trauma as humans because of our capabilities. We needed those emotions to help us process. And one of those emotions is anger. And I just want to say to anybody out there who may feel like they're angry at God, that he can handle it. And there is nothing wrong with what you're feeling. He can handle it. And he's going to be right there until you come to the other side of it. Sorry, that I don't mean to preach, but
no, preach, sister. Because when I went through my divorce, I went through a grieving process with that.
Absolutely.
But then I also went through I hated God process too. Very, very mad at God, and the guilt that I had because I was mad at him, and the stuff that I had to process through. So I'm glad that you said that, because not only from having someone deceased in your family, it's important what you're saying. grief comes in all
Yeah.
aspects.
Yeah.
Right? And it's
There's no
important.
timeline on
Yeah.
grief. There's no expectations for what it looks like. People talk about the stages of grief, but
Mhm.
those are actually original intention of those stages of grief was for somebody who was given a terminal diagnosis about themselves. The authors of our program for the grief recovery method, in their book, it says, I've never once had somebody come to me and be like, my father's not dead, when in fact he is. So that denial element is rarely there when you're looking at the death of someone, right? Or a divorce. Like, no, my divorce did not happen. There's no denial there, right?
Yeah. Right.
So, but grief looks all sorts of ways,
Mhm.
and there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's more like a scribbled box of lines than it is, any sort of normality. And there's no timeline to it. And it's really what it is. Like, the grief work that we do is allowing us to not move on, not to forget, but to move forward, to acknowledge, and then release so that we have capacity for happiness again. And I think that's what grief keeps us from, is that capacity for happiness. And so when we can create that space where I still miss this person, but now I can be happy, with that as part of me, as opposed to it dragging me down. Like, that's what we seek to help people do.
Wow. What is the difference between a grief recovery certification and then a grief recovery therapist?
Right. So our certification means that we are certified in this particular process. So we don't have any medical training as far as like a licensed counselor or therapist would have. So that would be the difference. Like, certification is generally in a particular process or a particular model. Licensing is going to be that, counselor level where they've taken a lot more, they have a lot more credentials that they have to complete, a lot more CEs. And then you also have like psychiatrists who are on that doctor level. So you could kind of liken it to like a life coach.
Okay, sure.
But we are, as opposed to just like helping guide you through like we're certified in a specific program and we do things a specific way. And so it's basically saying you went through training and you know how to do this thing. And we're approving you to do this thing with other people.
That's great. What's coming up next?
So we've got a couple of things. We just started our first advocacy work. And yesterday, mid-March, my director of support and I went to the Capitol and advocated for a Missouri state bereavement leave policy. There's no federal bereavement leave policy, and only 5 states in the nation have one. And so we're advocating that Missouri enact one so that businesses give their employees the adequate time off they need to grieve the loss of a loved one. Right now, we did a survey of Missouri residents, and we found that 90% of them either get 3 days off or it's either unknown or varies. The average is 3 to 5 days. Yeah. And like 55% of business owners that responded said they didn't even have a written bereavement leave policy. So that's something that we're advocating for.
That's cool.
Thank you. It's a whole new territory for me. That was a fun day. Oh my gosh. But we had like 12 meetings and people really wanted to talk to us about it. And we have a cautious optimism about the outcome.
That's great.
And then as far as like fun things to do, in June, we have our carnival this year. It'll be June 8th at the Shrine Mosque. The carnival is open to the public from 1:30 to 4, and it is $5 at the door for ages 3 and up. Everybody can come, and you get like an all-access pass to play all of the games. And we have face painting and balloon artists and aerial acrobats and bounce houses and princesses. I mean, it's a blast. We've been doing it for years. This will be our 11th one, so we're really excited. And then we're
located in Springfield, Missouri. So people that
correct, that's right, Springfield, Missouri.
So if you're vacationing to Branson, or if you're vacationing to Springfield in that time frame,
absolutely.
Now, is the information on your website?
It is, absolutely. Okay. And that evening we transition to what it's called Making Memories Day, is what our carnival is called. And then we have MMD After Dark. So that's our fundraising gala. It is a fundraiser, but we don't make it like any other gala. It's not just dinner and give us money. It is dinner and costume contests. We have an 80s theme for both events this year.
Fun.
Costume contests at both. So I can't wait to see little kids dressed up in 80s clothes. I can't wait. But then we have the gala's 80s themed as well. We'll have a live DJ. We'll have an 80s dance off. So you got to work on your moonwalk.
Nice.
And we'll have a costume contest for that. We have a huge silent auction, massive prizes for, the table that donates the most money and things like that. So it's going to be a blast. And those are also there's only a certain number of tickets to that. So you do have to buy those in advance. And they're also under the events tab on our website.
Okay, cool. And your website is again?
OAW photo, as in On Angels Wings, photo.org.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was great. Okay.
Well, thank you. And I really appreciate everything that you do.
Well, thank you for having me and letting me share.
I'll keep you in my prayers, definitely.
Thank you.
Talk to you later, hon.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Thank you for watching or listening to this episode on Reflect Live podcast. Next up, speaker Latria is Saturday registered www.reflectlivepodcast.com. Latria Nitra's testimony of resilience and strength. Latria's story is one of overcoming adversity. Growing up with drug-addicted parents and enduring the hardships of an abusive foster home, she faced additional challenges due to her disability. Yet, Latria refuses to let these obstacles define her. Instead, she courageously confronts the misconceptions surrounding disability, inviting us to challenge societal norms and perceptions. Listen on Spotify, iHeart, iTunes, or live stream on Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram. Register now on www.reflectlivepodcast.com. Follow so you